Good afternoon again. Thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. For many of you, this is the first time meeting the Dream Center, so we are super excited that you all decided to join us today. We have lots of information to share with you, and we want to get to know you a little bit. And in today's webinar, we're going to give you lots of information for not only starting up your grants, but your implementation and ways that we're going to support you. So one of the things we'll do is I'm going to ask everyone who is here to put your names in the chat. You're going to put your name, your institution, your college or university. Let us know if you have a 325K or a 325M. Okay, so your name, your institution. I want to know the focus of your project and whether you are a 325K or a 325M. So we'll just continue to have you guys add those things to the chat as we speak today. We want to get to know a little bit about who all joined us. And first things first, we want to say a big congratulations to all of you for your accomplishment in securing a 325K or 325M grant. We do not want to undervalue what a major accomplishment that was. So if you all have not already, pat yourselves on the back because we know how much work you put into achieving this. So congratulations to you all. Before I introduce the team, we have three major objectives today. One is to provide you an orientation to your major milestones and your major deliverables as a part of implementing your projects. And then we also want to communicate with you about how the Dream Center is able to support you in your grant implementation. And that's important because we do support other groups. And so we want you to know the ways that we can connect with you and help you accomplish your goals. And for 325K and 325M, that is primarily going to be through grant management, grant reporting, implementation, and as I mentioned before, meeting your major milestones. And now I'm going to introduce you to our team. I don't even think I introduced myself. My name is Shante Cummings. I am the Assistant Director of the Dream Center. And for those of you who don't know, the Dream Center was officially born October 1st, 2024. So we just celebrated our first birthday. And so we have accomplished a lot in our first year. And I will tell you the full name of the Dream Center, which is Delivering Resources, Education, Access, and Mentorship. We are an OSEP funded National Technical Assistance Center. And so our ultimate goal is to support programs that have early childhood, special education, related services. Did I skip one? Oh, and early intervention. And so we want to make sure that when you are developing your programs, whichever one of those categories your program falls into, we are here to provide you support with that. And then also, we want to create a collaborative relationship, not only between yourselves and the Dream Center, but also with each other. And you're going to hear us mention that a few times today about our goal for institutions to be able to create community with each other. Now, I promise you this time for real, I'm going to introduce the dream team. So, not everyone is with us today, but I will start off with Dr. Liz Kramer, who you heard speak just a few moments ago. Liz is our executive director and principal investigator at the Dream Center. The Dream Center is a cooperative agreement with two other universities, Bowie State University and also United Tribes Technical College, both with Dr. William Drakeford and also Dr. Lisa Azier. Our leadership team not only consists of myself and Dr. Kramer, but also Dr. Don Ellis, who is our associate director, myself, as I mentioned before, as the assistant director, and Maria Silva, who is our program director. And you're going to hear from all of these phenomenal people today in our webinar. Also, the Dream Center currently has three postdoctoral associates. Dr. Shweta Chandrasekhar, Coretta Das, and Tani Wilder. And ladies, if you are on with us now, if you don't mind just waving to the group, we are really fortunate to have this group of postdoctoral associates that helps us further our mission of supporting grants such as yourself. The Dream Center also has three consultants, and we utilize consultants beyond the three, but these are our three primary consultants really helping us hone in on our mission, which is to deliver quality technical assistance. And then also, we collect our own data and we have an external evaluator, and we want to make sure that we are delivering services to our highest potential. We have a stellar advisory board that we are very proud of, and I won't name them all here. You can see them, but I do want to let you know that just last month we met with all of the members of our advisory board. We told them about all of the things we have planned in our year two, one of which is to really form these relationships and be able to consistently support you all that are here today. And they are excited and very supportive of our work, and they communicate with us, and we communicate with them regularly about the work that we are doing. And also, if you look across the screen, I'm sure you're going to see names that you recognize. These are professionals who have years of experience, not only in special ed, but also in grant development and grant management. And finally, the Dream Center has six doctoral interns, all in varying levels of their PhD journey, along with us. And we are fortunate to have such an extensive and varied leadership team. As I mentioned before, we are here. The Dream Center is here to support all institutions of higher education through technical assistance. And I mentioned before, if your projects are focusing on early intervention, early childhood special education, or related services, we have resources to support those efforts. And one of our other primary focuses is to help novice grantees secure federal grants. So this isn't the group that you all fall in, but we do want you to know that we deliver technical assistance on both sides of the spectrum. So we are doing work to help institutions secure federal grants, and then once they get those federal grants, then we want to help you maximize them, sustain the work that you're doing through implementation. And ultimately, our goal is to strengthen the special education workforce, to improve services for children with disabilities and their families. And you can see in red our keywords here. These are the phrases that are consistently in our mind, and we want to make sure that we're delivering technical assistance that helps us accomplish these goals. So, as I mentioned before, we want to help universities increase their grant submissions, secure funding, as you all already have, and then now we will be in the phase with this group here of supporting your program sustainability. So I am going to turn it over to Liz, who is going to talk about your post-award guidance.
Okay, thank you, Shantae. On behalf of the Dream Center, I know Shantae already said it, but congratulations to all of you. We are so excited for you in having your projects. I know one thing we didn't ask you to put in the chat is whether you are a first-time grantee recipient. Maybe if you can use the feature on Zoom where you raise your hand. If you can just raise your hand if this is your first OSEP grant that you have just received, because there's a special category of folks, I think, if you really have a grant for the first time. And I know many of you received a message probably from Tracy Dixon or your project officer telling you that you need to participate and collaborate with the Dream Center. And we are so happy to have you all on board, but we definitely want to make sure we're here to support those of you who really just don't have a lot of experience with these grants. I see already 12 of you at least have raised your hand. So special congratulations to those of you who are new to this space. I can tell you I've been in this space for over 20 years, and I got into this space by working with the Technical Assistance Center that existed a little over 20 years ago that helped me learn how to write a grant and then how to implement that grant. So I consider my role as the director of the Dream Center in really paying it forward and supporting you all who are new to this. And congratulations to all of you. If you're in panic mode right now about now what do I do? Don't worry, we're here to help, and we'll get started with kind of giving you some of that support today. So a few key items that hopefully you're already familiar with, but I just want to make sure. And we're going to definitely have time at the end for questions, but if there's like a burning question as I'm talking, feel free to either put it in the chat or raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer questions in live time if there's something really relevant to what I'm saying. So first of all, you should all be familiar with the notice inviting applications. That was the original kind of guidelines that you followed when you submitted your grant back in June. So the notice inviting applications is what's put out by OSEP that describes all the details of what you must do in your grant. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably looked at that really, really carefully for those 4 to 6 weeks that you were writing your grant, and you probably haven't looked at it since. And so it might not be a bad idea to take that out, dust the cobwebs off and take another look at it and remember what it was that you were charged to do. Another document that I recommend you take a look at is your budget narrative that you submitted, because you had a very clear plan that allowed you to be funded on how you were going to spend your money. Probably a good idea to remind yourself of those things that you had budgeted your money for. Another key document that I'm going to show you an example of on the next slide is the grant award notification. That's the document that you received via your G5 notification that you were awarded this money. And that GAN is really important because it gives you critical information about your grant. I'm going to show you that in a little more detail in a moment. And then within that GAN, there may have been a box that said certain conditions of your award, like you were funded, but you need to do X, Y, or Z. So that's really important to familiarize yourself with in case there were any special conditions. And then finally, you should make sure that you've been in communication with your OSEP program officer. Hopefully you've already received an email from them. I know many of you have probably had brief meetings with them. And then if there were any changes that they wanted you to make to your grant upon starting, hopefully you've already received those changes and are aware of what you need to do. And if there's anybody who feels like I don't know what any of these are, or I missed a step, we can definitely look at that during the Q&A period. But hopefully all of you this is hopefully sounding familiar for you, all of these documents. So here, as promised, here's a picture of a GAN. So I mentioned I've been doing grants, OSEP grants, for over 20 years. I started at FIU in 2002 as an assistant professor. And in 2003, I wrote my first grant. I actually wrote two that year, got them both, a K and a D. The D are the leadership grants. And I've had grants consistently since. I think the number now is 18 OSEP grants that I've had. So I just took a little capture here for you of the GAN, the grant award notification, for one of my current projects. It's a 325K. And I went back to the initial GAN so you could see what year one GANs look like. And again, hopefully you've all seen this. You all will have your own. These are accessed through the G5 system. So if you haven't logged into G5 yet, that's an important thing to do, and we'll talk some more about that today. But this is the first page of that grant award notification. And you can see here it has my contact information, the contact information of my project officer at OSEP, who, by the way, this is an old form and this person is no longer at OSEP, but I did want to show you year one, so ignore the name. And then it shows you the current budget period. So in year one, many of you probably received $250,000 or some there whereabouts. And then it also shows the projections for the future years of the 5-year project. So this is what the first page of the GAN looks like. There are several pages. A lot of it is just kind of small, fine legal print. I recommend you read all of it. If you had any special conditions attached to your award, they would be specified in the GAN. And this is a legally binding document, so you're responsible for all of those conditions. So you definitely want to make sure, if you haven't read it in detail yet, that you go ahead and do so. And one thing I will say, kind of off topic of the slide. So as Shantae mentioned, we are an OSEP funded technical assistance center, but we don't work for OSEP. We do have the expertise of Dawn, who you're going to hear from in a little while, who is a retired OSEP project officer. So she has all the wisdom and knowledge. And of course, I bring knowledge from my many years of grants with OSEP, but we are not OSEP. So you can think of us as your critical friend, mentors, guidance through this process, but we are not OSEP. So you can always feel comfortable approaching us with questions you have that you might not feel comfortable asking OSEP. So I just wanted to make sure that relationship was clear. So some other things you might want to make sure you're familiar with right at the front are, who are the key members on your grant? So I'm assuming most of you here are the PIs, principal investigators. Sometimes we call them project directors. We use different names for them, but there's the one key person who's the name on that GAN, like the official name that OSEP recognizes as the representative of the university, who is the primary point of contact. And then many of you also have some other people on your project. So you might have a co-principal investigator or a co-director, and that person would be a support to the principal investigator or director. Many projects have a project coordinator who kind of helps with that day-to-day management of activities. Some of you might have written in consultants to your budget who have very specific roles but aren't part of that key leadership team. And then there's two other kind of categories of people that I want to make sure you're thinking about including in this process who we don't always think of because maybe they weren't written into the grant. And that's your budget office. There's different names at different universities. Sometimes that's the Office of Sponsored Research, the Office of Sponsored Programs. At FIU, it's called the Office of Research and Economic Development. But that fiscal office is going to be very important for you to establish a relationship with. You probably did so during the submission of your grant, but just in case that relationship wasn't fully established, or if you're in a situation like I am, where there's one group of people who do pre-award and a whole different group of people who do post-award, it's really important that you get to know who is your liaison in that office. Who do you need to have on speed dial if there's an issue about budgets or a concern about what you can spend, and make sure, of course, you're in good relations with them for easy communication. And then finally, within your university, your leadership. So whether that's your department chair, your dean, or any other folks who might be in the chain of approvals when you want to spend money, make a change, add a course, any of those things, good to have those relationships established and make sure they're familiar with what you plan to do with your project, just to kind of ease issues that can arise down the pike. We're going to think about, and I know you all got notified end of September, your project started October 1st. So when we talk about tasks to complete in the first 90 days, technically you are already about 60 days in. So I know this has been kind of a wacky time in place where you all found out you were funded and then the government shut down and probably not a whole lot happened immediately upon after finding out you were funded. So we are here now. So you still have about 30 days left in your first 90 days, but honestly, I would say there's a bit of a grace period in year 1, 2 as well, but you don't want to let too much time and too much dust collect under you before you start initiating some of your important activities to start with. So first of all, again, finalize any outstanding negotiations. If there were any special conditions or requests from your project officer, make sure those are all ironed out. I mentioned this G5. If you are somebody new to this grant space, you might not have had the pleasure of working with G5 before. I will tell you, it does take some getting used to. This is that g5.ed.gov where all of the official documents for your grant live, and you will be utilizing that quite a bit over the next 5 years. You'll be entering all your annual reports there. If there's any updates to the GAN, they will come there each year when you receive continuation funding. It will all go through G5. So if you haven't yet established your access, make sure you have it. Make sure you have a login. If you haven't used it in several months, your login will have expired and you'll have to reset it. It's also a bit temperamental. Like, I'm a Mac user. It does not like Safari. I have to download other browsers when I'm interacting with G5. If you see on the right, there is a video that we have on our YouTube page. And in just a few minutes, Maria's going to pop in and walk you all through of our universal resources. This is one of them. I do have a video we uploaded about how to use G5. And clearly people have a need for this video because this is the most popular video on our YouTube page. So if you're struggling with G5, feel free to check out that video or contact the Dream Center and we'll try to walk you through it. We are not tech support though. There is a tech support for G5, but we just have a lot of experience with it and know some of its quirks. So don't wait until you need to do a report to set up your G5. You definitely want to have that squared away sooner than later. Additionally, if you haven't already done so, it's time to start hiring anybody for these grant-supported roles. So for example, on my projects, I always have a graduate assistant who's part-time, who assists with the projects. If you haven't already hired that person, it's time to think about doing that. If you need to hire a project coordinator, if you need to set up contracts with your consultants, this would be a really good time to start doing that. And then, of course, make sure all of your internal accounts with your sponsored programs or budget office are set up, because I know at my university, it takes a little while for them to load that money, and you obviously can't start spending that money until it's loaded. And hopefully many of you either have started to enroll scholars or are recruiting scholars to begin in the near future. You will obviously need those monies available to be able to pay tuition and other project-related expenses. And then finally, you should all be thinking about launching your scholar recruitment. I know some of you may have a planning year, and so you might have a little more time to work on that. And some of you have hit the ground running and already maybe feeling a little behind the 8 ball to get those scholars recruited. So those are definitely some things that are kind of in the initial days of what to do with your project. The other on the right column there, the PDPCS. So if you're not familiar with that, what that is, that's the Professional Development Program Data Collection System. It's a website. that pdp.ed.gov that you will need to set up an account with, because all of your data entry related to scholars, whether it's pre-service scholar service obligation forms, the pre-service scholar obligations, or whether it's once you enroll scholars, updating the system of who the scholars are. You'll be using that system each year. So again, you just want to make sure you have that account created. And that's the photograph on the bottom right there. Okay, now we can move along. So your institutional agreements, if you have not already made these connections, I recommend that you make sure you're coordinating with your registrar. It could be that you need to set up new courses that maybe weren't originally planned, but now that you have a cohort of students starting, maybe you need to add certain courses. So make sure that that's all set up. And how will students be enrolled? I know at my university, there's a different process for registering students who are grant funded versus students who are self-registering and self-paying. You also want to make sure you're keeping records of everything that's going on for accountability purposes, both in your reporting to OSEP and just in your internal records in case there's ever an audit. You want to make sure you're setting up the budget with your fiscal office and having very clear communications about what are allowable costs. There's the internal offices that you have to always be getting permission from things you do, as well as your OSEP project officer. What I find is I might ask a question to my internal office and they don't want to let me do something that I already know I can do. So an email from my project officer kind of helps that happen a little better. So just make sure everybody's kind of on the same page of what you can and can't do with the money. And then certainly if you're going to be hiring anybody new to your project team, you want to be communicating with HR to make sure folks are onboarded. And if you're new to the role of directing a project, you might not be clear on who's in charge. So for example, you might have to approve time or pay for staff you hire on your project, and that might be a new experience for you. So just kind of learning what those processes and procedures are. So as I mentioned, I've had 18 of these projects over 20 plus years. So I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, as has Don, who's going to be sharing some things with you later. But just a few of the key lessons that I think would be helpful to know right up front. So within your budget, there's not a whole lot of room in these personal prep grants for creativity and what you can spend money on. There's basically a few basic categories in which you'll do your spending. So personnel would be whatever spent on you and your support team in implementing the project. And then of course you have your fringe benefits that go along with that. And I know the fringe benefit rates over these 20 plus years have climbed high. So a big portion of the budget now is going towards fringe benefits. Then you have travel, and all of you minimally should have budgeted for that project directors meeting at OSEP in the summer. So minimally you have that, but you also might be traveling to do some recruitment. You might be traveling to conferences with scholars once they're enrolled. And so setting up your travel. And then the biggest category of your projects, because at least 65% of the budget had to go to this, would be for scholar support. And that includes tuition, stipends, any other money that's directly for scholars, as well as any supplies. Now, the indirect costs are consistent across all the projects, fixed at 8%. And whatever money you're spending directly on students or scholars is exempt from that 8% indirect cost, which is a wonderful benefit since so much of the budget is probably devoted to the scholars. And then another rule that many people are not familiar with is the 10% transfer rule. So that means that up to 10% of your budget can be moved between categories without having to get prior approval from OSEP. So if you're looking to move more than 10%, you need prior approval. But if it's less than 10% between categories, you can move it. The one caveat to that is you can never have moved money in such a way that you drop below that 65% of budget going towards scholars. So that's just kind of something to make sure. But if you're moving money between personnel and travel or supplies, there's really no issues to worry about there as long as it's under 10% of the budget. And then finally, it's really important to set up good records and documentation. So even with the budgets in particular, we always keep our own internal budget for the grant separate from the university budget, because I can't speak for every university. I can only speak for all the ones I've been involved with in these processes. The universities typically take a very long time to post expenses. And so you might get a monthly report. And by the way, at my university, those monthly reports are about 2 or 3 months behind. So you want to make sure you have an accurate understanding of how much money is available to the project. So we keep our own internal records. And then of course we cross-reference those with the official university records. Really important to keep all receipts, to keep track of all the effort of the different key project personnel. And then of course, if there's any other internal forms your university requires, you need to stay in compliance with those, as well as the external forms that OSEP will require, particularly around the annual performance report time. So I have a question in the chat. How long do we keep these records? I'm going to punt that one to Dawn for an official answer. She's our legal representative who knows all the actual rules and regulations. Dawn, do you have an answer for that?
I would say it should align with your institution's record keeping process.
So my uninformed answer, what I do, I keep everything because it's all digital. You know, when it was paper files, there was a point at which we might shred things. I still have every record I've ever had digitally for my projects. But what I will say is the surprising piece of this that came back to bite me in the butt once or twice was related to the service obligation. So as you probably know, when scholars enter your program, they have to sign that service obligation form, that binding contract that they will quote unquote pay back their scholar, the resources they receive by staying in service to special education. And so the PDPCS system is relatively new. It wasn't around 20 plus years ago. It's probably been around, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. But that system tracks the scholars and keeps track. But I have had a couple of scholars over the year who did not stay current in reporting their time to the PDPCS. And then I have been contacted, 10 years later asking for information about scholars. So as a rule of thumb, the service obligation requirement, once a scholar graduates, they have however much time they owe plus 5 years in which to complete that service obligation. So I would keep any records on scholars, certainly at least however long that is. So if you have a 2-year project, there would be a 4-year service obligation, which means scholars would have 9 years after graduating to complete that. I would keep that for at least 10 years. But again, now that we're in a digital space, honestly, I would probably just try to keep everything. If it's receipts and things like that on general spending, I would say until the grant closes is probably a good answer. But anything on scholars, I think needs to be kept longer than that, just to ensure that if anybody ever comes back to you wanting information on a scholar who has not fulfilled their service obligation, that you've kept those documents at least through the time that service obligation should have happened. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that, excuse me, Liz, that also depending upon how you are surveying scholars in their workplace, which kind of aligns with, the service obligation. And 9 years, I'm not sure if you were referring to a doctoral program for that, where it might be a little less, but you also have scholars that have gone part-time, which could also extend that. But definitely, I think the scholar records are a factor.
Yeah. And that 9 years, I was assuming a 4-year service obligation from a 2-year project plus the 5-year grace window that they have in which to complete their service obligation. So yes, if it was a doctoral student, their program would probably be 4 or 5 years. Their service obligation would be 8 or 9 years, and then they'd have 5 additional years to complete that time. So, do your own math based upon how long your program is, but certainly throughout the time but until all scholars have completed their service obligation. So we do have a question in the chat. Who's responsible for adding your grant information into the PDP system so you can start adding scholars? Mine is blank. So you should have, I'm not sure if you're asking about who makes sure that your grant information is available in PDP or who actually adds information on the scholars. So there's 2 different answers depending on which question was being asked. So if you can clarify that in the chat, I promise we will get to that question.
And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about I see there's another question in the chat, and I'm gonna cover that about.
Okay, so we will pause the questions on the PDP and the service obligation until later in the presentation. And if we don't feel like they were answered by the time we come to Q&A, then let's ask those again, and we will definitely make sure they get answered.
But please clarify Liz's the question that she was trying to address.
Okay. So what are the reports that you are responsible for? So there will be an annual performance report. This is what you submit to OSEP to each year to show them about your progress in your project, and that is evaluated, and that is what's used to determine whether or not you're going to receive your continuation funding. So all of us, I assume, wrote 5-year projects, and we got our year 1 of funding. And typically we will get our funding years 2, 3, 4, and 5, but the official way in which that happens is we submit our annual performance report, OSEP reviews it, they decide you are doing what you need to do, and they give you your next year of continuation funding, if all is well, which hopefully everybody will have all as well. So within your annual performance report, you'll probably get a letter. Usually it comes out end of January, if not first week of February, explaining all the requirements of the annual performance report. I haven't seen that letter yet, but I predict the reports will be due May 1st. And my birthday is May 2nd, so I know they're always due right around my birthday on that Friday, because it's always my birthday gift to myself to have all my reports entered before I celebrate my birthday. So I will predict they'll be due May 1st, unless anything changes. So you'll have a few months with the directions on what to do. Now, the interesting thing about the annual performance report is you are reporting on things from March 1st to February 28th. In a leap year, it would be February 29th. Now, most of you started your projects, I think everybody in this room probably started your projects October 1st. So in your case, you will only be reporting in this first report from October 1st to February 28th. So you probably won't have a lot of things to report, and that's fine. We will definitely meet with you all prior to the annual performance reports being due and give you a lot more specific guidance on how to navigate those reports. But just kind of have that in your awareness that early in the spring semester, you'll receive the information about the directions for the APR. You will need to work on pulling all of that information together, and that will be due sometime around May 1st, and it will be entered through G5. So you'll create all the documents offline, route them around your university for everybody to clear them, and you will upload them into G5. So that's why you want to make sure anybody who needs access to G5 has that and knows how to use it, because you don't want to be caught against the deadline of entering your report and then dealing with technical issues, which sadly G5 is prone to. So again, there's a video for help. We will definitely meet with you all again before APR time and walk you through the process. We'll have support available, but think of that timing for what you'll be doing in the spring, and keeping in mind you'll be reporting from October 1st through February 28th. And then finally, that PDPDCS website that I mentioned earlier, that's where you'll be maintaining all of your scholar data and ensuring that all the scholars have completed any requirements into that system. And again, Dawn will touch on that a little bit more later. Okay, so how can the Dream Center help you with all of these kind of tasks that you'll be doing? We will be able to provide technical assistance for you all in managing your grants. And how will that look? So some of what we'll be doing is webinars, such as this one. We're also in the process of putting together some asynchronous modules, which will be available in the back end of our Dream On portal that Maria is going to fill you in more about. We also have our website that Maria is going to share with you with universal resources that are open to anybody and everybody. And then we will have you all set up in your communities of practice for targeted support through the back end of our Dream On portal. And we have on the next slide kind of a explanation of how we provide our technical assistance, if we can go to the next slide. So we are set up in a tiered model of technical assistance, and the level of support you will receive will kind of depend on your level of need. And we have ways that we determine, we have a process we use to determine what level of need folks potentially have. Now, I saw there were about 20 of you who raised your hands at your first-time grantees, so you might need a little more support than some others. If you're somebody like me in the room who's had, over a dozen OSEP grants in the past, and you came today because you were told to, you probably don't need a whole lot of support from us because you've got a lot of experience. But there's a system we use to determine. So kind of like if you think of the MTSS model, so everybody has access to our universal supports. And again, Maria is going to highlight these for you in more detail in just a few minutes. And that would be anybody, even folks who don't have grants, just folks who are interested in topics around special ed can go to our website and access these universal supports. And for you all, that might be finding some resources to tie into some of your coursework or general templates we have out there or tips and tricks we have out there for grant management. You would have access to that. Now, each of you, because of the nature of you being a M or a K grantee, part of our charge as a technical assistance center is to support you in managing your grants. So you kind of automatically get a bump into the targeted space. Again, if you don't feel you need it because you're a seasoned expert at grant management, you don't need to necessarily take full advantage of our targeted services, but you are certainly all eligible for our targeted services by nature of the fact that we are charged with supporting the M and the K grantees in implementing their grants. And the way that will look is things like today, our live webinars. We will be holding office hours in key times like APR reporting time, or other key times where we feel you might need support. You always will have access to contact us through our contact on the website or request technical assistance through a form on the website. And all of you here will be enrolled in our communities of practice which are through our backend portal, where you'll have your groups. The M's will be in one group and the K's will be in one group, where you'll be with each other, people in the same kind of cohort year of your grant. And we'll use that space to have small group mentoring, to share resources, to, get to know each other a little better and maybe share what's working, concerns we have, and we'll be communicating with you all that way. Now, there might be some of you who are new to this grant space and having a little difficulty in getting things going, maybe recruiting scholars, maybe figuring out your evaluation. If we determine that you have that level of need, we do have resources for intensive support where we can provide one-to-one mentors who have a lot of experience with grant management, who can meet with you as needed to kind of give you that hand-holding and support that might not come through in the small group mentoring. And I have a question in the chat about the DREAM website. If one of my DREAM team members can go ahead and put our website in there. We definitely want y'all to know it's dreamtacenter.org. And that's also our handle on all the socials. And again, Maria's going to plug all of that in just a moment. But anyway, here's the general tiered model. So again, everybody in the world has access to our universal. You all automatically will have access to our targeted should you choose to, based on the virtue of your being a new grantee, even if you are not new to grant space, new to this grant fiscal cycle. And then again, some of you may need that intensive support as well. Next slide, please. So what are some examples of things that might be provided? And I do want to also highlight the point that Shantae made earlier. We're about 1 year old. So our first year was kind of a planning year, getting everything set up. Now we're really kicking our TA into higher gear. So a lot of what our ideas are for grant support are still being developed, and we can also develop more things in these examples based on what you may need. We pride ourselves on tailored technical assistance. So some of these things are already available. Some of these things are in the works. And some of these things we might not have thought of yet. And you might tell us, hey, what would be really helpful is X, Y, or Z. And we can try our best to provide that. So some targeted technical assistance that might be helpful for you in your early startup time, interpreting the requirements, aligning your project activities with the funded proposal. We can provide advice on hiring. We can help you with figuring out your internal timelines and project management systems. Something that's worked out really well with another group we support of existing grantees is sharing resources. So like maybe one of you has developed a tracking system that works really well for you. If you're so inclined to share that in your portal, once we show you how to do that, that might be a really great resource for others. So it doesn't just have to be things we've created. It's also creating the space for you all to collaborate with each other. And then as well, we're working on templates for you to use in any early communications with your relevant folks you need to collaborate with. So what are some other things we do? I mentioned we have another group we've been supporting. So in our first year, even though it was the planning year, we were supporting the 325X grantees, who's a group that received grants to develop new special education programs. And so a lot of work we did in year one was designing support around curriculum and program design. Now, I know you already have your programs, and not only do you have them funded. And so they obviously were deemed strong enough to receive OSEP grants. However, if you need a little support in maybe beefing up your syllabi, making sure your courses are infusing the best evidence-based practices, building stronger field practicum, we are happy to share resources with you that we've developed for our 325X grantees that kind of address some of this curriculum and program design. And then finally, something that I know you all are probably thinking about actively is scholar recruitment, selection, and retention. So we're here, we can provide advice and recommendations on how to recruit. Particularly, I know sometimes this is a challenge for our M folks in the MSIs, HBCUs, and tribal colleges. We've got a lot of experience in that particular space, so we're happy to help you with that. We can also help you review your application materials for potential scholars, or figuring out interview protocols or scoring rubrics to make sure you're capturing the best candidates for the slots. We can also support you in retention strategies. So do you have an effective plan in place to provide mentorship? Do you have the right academic supports? How can you really lean on that cohort model to keep those scholars engaged and supported? And then developing partnerships with local school districts. We actually had a webinar yesterday for a different group of folks about this. And so our recorded webinars that we have on some of these topics that we've done for other groups, we're also happy to share with you all if you think it would be helpful in implementing your projects. And then we can also help you with the back-end management side of things. So how do you interpret OSEP requirements? Like what's an allowable cost? Now, you are always welcome to contact your OSEP project officer, and I encourage you to do so about OSEP requirements. But sometimes you have a question and you think you know, and you don't really want to ask your project officer, you're just not sure, you can feel free to contact us with that information. We can also provide support on how to work with payroll. And again, some of these processes will be very specific to your university, but we can guide you on maybe how to approach asking those questions or setting up templates for these systems. We can assist you with tracking your scholar progress, enrollment, and service obligations, and how to work effectively with those offices around your campus. So I know we talked a bit already about the APR because that's probably the first kind of big task you'll need to take on as far as reporting. So we will absolutely provide a training session. We'll probably do that in, I would guess, late February, early March, about how to get those APR reports together. We will talk a lot more at that time about performance measures, although I know Dawn is going to touch on that later today. We will also do, during that training, we will walk through the APR. We'll provide you examples. Last year we did, this was the one kind of support we provided to the 325Ms last year in the case, and we provided very specific examples. I basically took some of my grants over the years and we turned those into templates that you all could use to see how to write those reports. And we will also support you with any of those tools you need to track scholars. There won't be a whole lot probably for you to report this first APR on scholars, but you should at least have the plans in place of how you will be doing that. And again, at that time of year, we'll definitely hold some office hours. So if you need to pop in with questions, we'll have the webinars and you all can ask questions there. But if you have those like unusual cases that you really want to troubleshoot one-on-one, we'll have office hours for those as well. So as I mentioned, you will all be in the community of practice. This is part of your targeted technical assistance. And so in that space, that's where you can kind of share your challenges, your solutions, share what's working in your programs. There's going to be a discussion board there, so you can always post. You don't have to wait for us to have a webinar. You can post a question there, and either one of our Dream Team members or one of the people in your cohort might have an answer or tell you what's worked for them. So you can utilize that space for just general challenges, solutions, questions, answers. We also will provide that small group mentoring across each of the cohorts. And we'll try to help you foster some cross-institutional collaboration. So what's working great, we're all kind of strapped for time and resources. So I'm a firm believer in if it's already been created and working, there's no need to create something yourself that already exists if somebody's willing to share that. And so part of what we do at the Dream Center is we leverage existing resources. So a lot of our universal resources on our website are actually connecting folks to other resources that exist, like other TA centers, for example, the Cedar Center, the Iris Center. So in that same way, if you all have things you've created that are working and you are so inclined to share, we can help foster how to share these great resources across institutions. So nobody's starting from scratch if there's a great resource that already exists. And then just some general problem solving around program redesign, program evaluation, scholar retention, anything that might come up that's a struggle for somebody. We all have our unique challenges, but there's probably few situations that somebody else hasn't encountered, at least in some variation, that we can use that shared wisdom and experience to support each other. And then finally, we will provide faculty mentorship and professional development. So each community of practice will have a Dream Center staff person who's assigned as kind of the liaison for that community of practice, as well as some of our Dream Center mentors. We have mentors. They were not pictured in the initial slides, although some of the advisory board members are also mentors. But we've developed a cadre of mentors who have extensive experience in the grant space, who are available to facilitate our COPs, as well as for that individual one-on-one mentorship should it be needed, who are just really going to be a great resource to you as needed in providing support along every step of the way. In addition, we'll continue to hold webinars like this. Here's some examples of webinars that we're putting together, and also asynchronous training modules if you prefer to do that learning at your own pace. But we are always open to suggestions. So if you have a need, if there's something you're working on, you can let us know, because again, chances are if you're struggling with something, there's probably other people within these 60 new funded grantees across the Ks and Ms who are having a similar issue. We can do our best to provide that support. And if we don't have the internal expertise, we have the ability to contract experts in that area to help support you as well. And then finally, when it comes to evaluation and continuous improvement, we can provide that guidance on how to implement internal evaluation processes that will align with what OSEP is looking for. We can help you develop tools that can measure scholar performance. A lot of times everybody puts together an evaluation plan when they submitted their project. It's time to go back and look at it and see what you said you were going to do. And oops, now you actually have to do it. And so you might have mentioned, you're going to follow up with scholars when they graduate and how well they're doing in their employers. How do I do that, right? What's a way I can do that? So we can provide support and things like that. How can you keep track of data? How can you use data to inform practice? Many of you might have an external evaluator, and that's great. You could certainly lean on them. Or if you're kind of struggling to connect the dots of how am I going to do what I said I was going to do, we can certainly help you with that as well. And then finally, we will have our technology enhanced support. And I think I'm about to punt it off to Maria, who's really going to walk you through all of these aspects through our Dream On portal, our Dream On website, and then, of course, our socials, which include our YouTube page with our on-demand modules, tutorials, walkthroughs. And within the backend portal, we're currently working really hard to develop these asynchronous courses that you can enroll in for what's relevant to you. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Maria Silva. I am the project director, program director. I do a lot of different things. The program director for the center. Many of you have received an email from me today, and I want to first start by apologizing to the Ks. I received your list yesterday, so I still have to build your portal and send you the access to it. So I should have it done for you by tomorrow, Monday at the latest, and then I'll send you the information. But for anybody who's on here who is an M, you received an email from me today with the login information, your temporary password, and also a link to a tutorial to provide you with assistance in getting through the program, to the portal. So I'm happy to share with you about our portal. We are the delivering resources, education, access, and mentorship through an online network. So that's why we have it dubbed the Dream On portal. And when you first go to our website, you're going to notice that it will automatically prompt you to become a subscriber to our newsletter. So we send out a quarterly newsletter, but also whenever we have recruitment for general GPD trainings or different kind of professional developments that we're going to be doing throughout the center, you'll receive kind of like a news blast through it. But we are very mindful that we're not sending you continuous emails to fill up your spam folder. So when you do go onto the first website, you're going to notice that it prompts you to subscribe to our newsletter. It is optional. You do not have to subscribe to it, but if you do, then you're automatically in the system to receive these updates. And one of the most important things that we wanted was to provide you with innovative content delivery. So we're focusing on community engagement within our cohorts, networking events, building collaboration and connections across different institutions of higher education, because we can all learn from each other in different ways. Through the website, you're going to notice that we share videos. There's opportunity that we're going to be working on for this upcoming year on podcasts. And then we also have several webinars that have been previously recorded and are already available on our YouTube channel. And at the end of the presentation, I will share with you all of our social media, but essentially we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter X, and Facebook. And also you can find us on YouTube, and it's at Dream TA Center, but I'll show it to you later on. Another thing that we're working on is developing information briefs and toolkits. Our team completed 5 different literature reviews on 5 different topics, and the information that they gathered was so valuable that we're going to go ahead and make products so that can provide you with that information. But on our website, you'll be able to see some of these things, and I'm going to take you on a dive into the website so you can actually see it. One of the things that we're most excited about is our resource hub. So part of our mission and our goals is to essentially, when any university is looking to start writing a grant or in the initial phases of their grant proposal writing or recently received the grant, is that they come to the Dream Center website first. And this is their one-stop shop to find resources that can support them when they are in that phase of writing their grants and enhancing the material that they have, the coursework that they have, their programs that they have. So we have a resource hub. It currently houses over 160 resources, and I'll show you that in a bit. They are structured so that you can search them up with keywords, but you can also look them up by your area, where there is early intervention, early childhood, special education, and related services. And you can also look at it through the different types. So I have it organized so you can see if it's a data report, a publication. It might be information on standards or evidence-based practices, some faculty guides, and a few more fun things that I think that you'll find very helpful. When you first go to the website, on the upper right-hand corner, there's going to be a button for you to log in. When you log in, you'll put in your temporary password if you haven't done yet. And I know some of you have, because I asked you guys to participate in your first blog post or discussion forum with us to give us a little bit of information about your grant, and that way we can expand. Because I know all of you entered some information in the chat when we first started, but there's so much more to tell about this grants that you guys are developing that you've created. So once you log on, you'll be able to change your password. You can edit your profile. You can add different documents, and you can also change your picture and communicate with others. If there's any other project team members that you think would need to have access to it, you would just send me an email and I'm happy to add them for you. I got one maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago while the presentation had already started, and I was already able to set it up and send it to them. So it's rather quick. So just send me an email and I can take care of that for you. Some of the resources that you're going to find in the portal is your ability to engage with your cohort, which are your 325Ms. The 325Ks will have their own cohort, and you'll be able to collaborate and also have access to your mentors whenever the opportunity arises. If you're going to have a meeting with a mentor, or if there's a little bit more guidance on a specific topic, you'll be able to engage with them through the portal. You'll also be able to have access to a folder that we are creating for every state that a grant is in currently. So we are working on state data reports where we're compiling information for different kind of areas related to special education. So we're looking at general statistics. We're pulling enrollments for Part B and Part C by race, by ethnicity, by eligibility category, by educational setting, personnel preparation, by who's qualified, who's not qualified per state. We've already completed 17 state reports, and some of the reports are already in your folders, and I'll show them to you. There's a few more for this particular M group that we have to complete. And as I mentioned, I just got the K list yesterday, so I haven't been able to check exactly what states those are, but we're going to be working on those for you, so you'll see. A couple of other tools that I want you to be aware of that you're going to find inside these folders in your portal. We already have an APR planning checklist available for you to think of things you want to have ready for May 2026. There's also a performance reporting common errors and solutions to help you when you get to that APR, since we know that that comes around the corner a lot faster than we expect. And we are working on 2 resources that will pair well with today's presentation. So one of them is the common pitfalls for new grantees, which I think you guys will find very beneficial. And then also the things that you may want to be doing in the first 90 days. And what are some related pitfalls to these different markers that we think would be best for you to complete. You'll also find, so along with the reports that we're creating, we pull the actual report itself from the government website or the state website so that you do have access to the full report. You know, our reports are kind of like a compilation into like a 25-page report of like the most key information, but we also have links throughout it that give you a link directly to where we got all the data from, so it's helpful for you guys. But in your portal, you'll also find these reports where we got most of the information from in case there's something maybe nuanced to your particular program that you need information on. That way you have access to all the information. And as I mentioned before, we are on the YouTube. We're on YouTube. We have a few different videos. Liz is correct. Her G5 video is the most popular one thus far. But essentially, whenever we conduct these type of webinars, we do go ahead and post them on our YouTube. If it's one that we're doing specific to maybe one type of grant, we may just put it on YouTube and send you guys a private link. But if there's some that are helpful for the wider population, then we'll put it on our public view. So dreamtacenter.org. And I just want to show you a couple of things that you'll be able to find on here. So this is our general website. Once you log in, you'll see your information on the upper right-hand corner, and you'll be able to access your dashboard. You won't see this black bar on the top. That's specific to my account, but you'll be able to see, we keep you up to date with the most current conferences that are happening, events that are occurring, information about who we are and our purpose. We have a page that gives you more specific information about our focus and our objectives, but more importantly, it gives you the connection to some of our partner centers. So we partner with various different technical assistance centers that are also OSEP funded. For example, the Cedar Center the Iris Center, ECTA, and there's organizations that we have a prominent connection with, like the Teacher Education Division of CEC, the Division of Early Childhood Education, National Indian Education Association, and a few others. And you'll be able to access their information directly through our page. You'll also notice on the top we have a section for personal prep, and within it, it gives you a few different links related to these different areas that are relevant to your program. So if there's any information you're looking for, so you find it here. We are continuing to revamp this and improve it and have some more interactive and engagement features. So look out for those within the next few months. You have information about our technical assistance, what our tier support is that Liz reviewed with you, our mentorship model. If you have a specific request of support that you need, you can fill out a technical assistance form. And then when you go to our resources, this is where we try to provide all the good stuff. So you'll have updated information about conferences that are happening, that are coming up. You'll also have information about further grant opportunities that are arising, professional development that can be done online. Iris Center, for those of you that have your programs that you're building, Iris Center has several dozens of different modules that can be helpful for you in your courses. So does the Cedar Center. And then you also have the calendar where we keep you up to date with information and programs and events, professional development. So in the resource hub, you'll see here, like I mentioned, you can look it up by keyword. If you select the drop-down menu under program focus, you'll see we have 145 resources related to early childhood SPED, 51 related to early intervention, and so forth, related services, special education, and those will continue to grow. You can also look at it based on the type of document that you're interested in. So are you looking for something related to best practices, course development, specific data reports, toolkits, any policy briefs? And then there's also a big group of publications related to things that can be helpful in personal preparation, not just developing your grant, but now your actual program that you are carrying out in your university. And then if you go to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see your dashboard once you've logged in. And you'll notice, mine has a cover page information. One thing I want to make note, because I've had a little bit of confusion sometimes with folks. So when you first go to your dashboard, you'll notice up here that there's a section called documents. Those are your personal documents. So maybe you want to put up a copy of your CV in case other people are interested in collaborating with you, right? Or you've done a recent publication and you want to share it with everybody and you want to put it in your folder. So you're going to be able to see your documents in that folder. But the group documents are in the group folder. So you'd have to first select the groups. You'll notice that I have a lot of groups, but yours is 325M funding year 2025 cohort, and the X's that I will be creating would be essentially the same, but it'll be 325K funding year 2025. So once you select on your group, one, you'll be able to see all the members of your group. So these are the dream staff, and then you'll be able to see all your fellow grantees to help you make connections and collaborate more widespread, which is one of our main goals. And then if you look in, I know some of you have already responded to the feed. So your feed has the updates that have happened. So these are the posts, those of you that have responded to the post that I made asking you for just general information about your grant. So I think it's great that you guys are engaging with the post and sharing information. It gives us that little deeper connection than just, hi, my name is. So I appreciate that. And then also, if you look in the documents tab, you will see the different states that are pertinent to the grants that are here today. And then the APR resources are in one folder, some different dream products are in another folder. And then the states that have already had their reports created, their reports are in their folder. So for example, New Mexico, in your folder, you already have the state data report, but I've also added the original reports where a lot of this information came from. So you'll see the most recent SPP and APR report for New Mexico, as well as their data displays. So I'm continuing to add them for the other states. The holiday break, the general government shutdown slowed things down for us to get your information, and then the holiday break last week. So, but you will see soon that all of the folders will have all your information in them. I just wanted you to have an idea of where you'll be able to find this information. And then, so before I move on, is there any questions about the portal?
You do have a question in the chat. How do we get to the videos like the G5 training videos?
Oh, everybody wants the G5. Okay. So those
I
are
might have to
simple.
do a better one if it's this popular.
Those are simple. Here's the YouTube page, our Dream channel, which is at Dream TA Center. So all of our social media handles, including YouTube, is at Dream TA Center. And in our YouTube page, you'll see we recently did one on curriculum in motion, and that is connecting, aligning standards and state expectations with the actual courses that you're developing. So or enhancing, if there's any courses that you want to enhance, maybe there were some requirements from your GAN that came out that you needed to change. So there's a very engaging webinar there done with Dr. Mary Little, and she has a lot of experience, and we created some tools. So you'll find that very helpful. We also have the G5 tutorial. See, it's already got 70 views. It's very popular. But we also have, which I'm sure we're going to have a new webinar coming up when the new APR comes around. But we completed this one last year for the APR, but the core content and information is the same. So you can also look at, and if you wanted to, for those of you that are specifically really, really new to the grant space, looking at that OSEP annual performance webinar could be very, very helpful for you. And that one's our second favorite. It's got 58. But also we have additional videos. They're just on the back end. So like I said, if we did one specifically for one type of grant or one section of a grant that they wanted more information, we may just not have it widely, but that way you can at least start connecting with us. You can subscribe to the page and you'll start to see whenever we post new videos. Good. Any questions?
So there's one other question in the chat from Marie, clarifying that you mentioned if the PI would like to provide access to co-PIs to the Dream Center portal, we can email you. Yes, if you respond to the email you got from Maria with the information and just add whatever names and email addresses of other project members you want added, she can definitely add those.
Absolutely. I've already added one so far. So if you message me, I can do it now while you guys are now hearing some more information from the fabulous Dawn Ellis.
Yeah, and I also want to add regarding Maria adding other key personnel. We just want to make sure that they are at a university. That's one of our requirements. We know some people may have like evaluators or other people that are not part of the university, but that's a requirement that we have, that they are key personnel that are on the grant that are part of your university or maybe a partnering university.
All right, take it away, Dawn.
Okay. Thank you, Maria. As they mentioned earlier, I'm Dr. Dawn Carol Ellis with Aurora Sun Services. I am a former OSEP project officer. I oversaw the personnel prep program with two of my colleagues. And after 20 years of service, I retired from federal service, but not from working. So I'm a speech language pathologist by profession. I have a private practice and a consulting firm. So yay, related services representing. So I'm going to go over some information just about the 325 program in general. So we know that the purpose of the program is to strengthen personnel preparation programs, also to prepare high quality scholars in special education and related services area and long-term outcomes. And we also, I'm referring to long-term for our evaluation plan for the Dream Center is to make sure that we're improving outcomes for children with disabilities and their families. So again, requirements of the personnel prep is to make sure that the program is designed and aligned with the notice inviting applicants so that your program is aligned with it, and also that your coursework, the practica, and the supervisory expectations, of course, align with whatever your national professional organization standards are, and that you're integrating evidence-based practices into all of the curriculum and program of study of your scholars. So again, the scholar pipeline, recruiting, selection, retention. One thing too, we want to make sure that you are, preparing scholars because these are personnel prep programs. So we want to make sure that you are setting up scholars for success, and also success in the sense that you are, doing targeted recruitment, that you are, you have a criteria in place for selecting scholars, that you have a wraparound services that include, start from retention all the way. For some of you may have built in coaching, once they have graduated, but we want to make sure that scholars are getting support so that they can be completers and that you can count them as completers, which is very important for this program. So the PDP, the Personnel Development Program Data Collection Center, that's really important for service obligation. As Liz mentioned earlier, she talked about the program or the database, and also she answered a question in a chat from earlier, but we want to make sure that you are aware that by now, if someone wants to put a link in the chat, just in case, to the center. So if you haven't been on their website, when you first get to the landing page, you'll see that there are 3 choices there. One is for OSEP. I think that's the first one, which is the one you want to click on. There's one for other programs under RSA and under tribal colleges, which is not the one that for the tribal colleges that we have that are grantees, but it's the first one under OSEP. Once you click on that, you will see there, then you'll see the landing page for the OSEP data collection system. And under the first, on the left, there is kind of a gray box. There's history. Under history is training and resources. So you want to make sure that you are familiarizing yourself by taking their training, by looking at their resources. Under training and resources are FAQs. So those are something that you definitely want to make sure that you are familiar with. And then under FAQs are pre-scholar agreement and exit certifications. So that is where you will find the pre-scholar agreements. Make sure that you are getting them directly from the website, because that way you will know that you have the most up-to-date. You're using the most up-to-date scholar and exit agreement, and there's usually a date on them. So that is where you can find that information. And I can't say enough that it's very important that you take the training. Also take the G5 training, not just ours, but if you are new to G5, take that training on their website too. Okay. So yeah, that's where you will enter and document the scholars and also tracking scholar progress. And it's important that you're familiar with the overview of the service obligation requirements when it comes to what a scholar has to do in order to fulfill service obligation. And we will make sure that there's a separate service obligation federal document that I know that we will probably send around or include on the portal, so to make sure that you have that. But as it states here, 51% of the time performing work that supports students with disabilities, special education. And sometimes that is a little, you may not know if a scholar will qualify, especially when it comes to like early childhood and you're in the community-based setting or in different settings. But the Data Collection Center has the FAQs on those types of things. They will answer questions, and they should be your first go-to. Of course, we can back up and support, but we'll make sure that we get the information that you need, but just make sure that you're starting there first. Okay, performance measure. In the notice inviting applicants and in the Federal Register, there are performance measures listed that all awardees have to adhere to. You will be reporting on those performance measures in your APR. So you want to familiarize yourself with those. And of course, we'll go back and as it gets closer to APR time, which is going to be very soon, that we'll hold a separate webinar to do a deeper dive into it. But you definitely want to make sure to go back and review the performance measure, and also start to think about your project measures. So you're going to have to set up project measures that align with the performance measures. And if you want to get a head start on that, definitely the training module that we did for last year takes a deeper dive into that. But we will definitely be, providing some technical assistance around performance measures in the future. Okay, well, we're going to talk about some of the common pitfalls. I also want to give a shout out to Maria, Shantae, and our social media team. Some of the pictures you see in the back are background of the slides are from our actual training and TAs that we have done. So we have been very busy in year one. So you'll see some the Dream Center in action in some of these slide pictures. So here, let's talk about some common pitfalls that I've observed, and we all have observed across projects. But in my role I've written grants, I've reviewed grants, and then been on the federal side. So we want to make sure that, in general, that delayed communication with your sponsor program, budget office, whatever research office, whatever it's called on your institution. I think Liz pointed this out, is very important. Every institution is different. How they may setting up your budget accounts, how they do it on your campus, the students, the tuition is paid, all of that is so important that you set up those communications. I would definitely recommend doing that in person, finding out who that, that key person is. Sometimes it's just one person, depending upon the size of your institution, but making sure that you're in communication soon. Also, establishing G5 credentials, making sure you can get in, taking the training. So make sure that you can access and see your grant. Sometimes we know that was not an issue, but it might have been just an error on OSEP side, but making sure that you can access your grant in G5 is important. And if for some reason, if you cannot, that you get that rectified. Also, skipping a post-award kickoff meeting, that's very important with your OSEP project officer, and then also holding your own internal post-award meeting. Just establishing that is, something that would be very important. Also, getting a jump start on recruiting and marketing, and just even in the planning year, having a plan. If you're taking a planning year, just making sure that you're starting on that. So whenever if you're starting right away, or in a year, or in a semester, some people only take a semester for a planning year, that you're ready to enroll and start scholars as you've planned and as you outlined in your application. And then also having a work plan, just making sure that you have started that and that you're not waiting for an actual deadline to start the work plan. Okay, so some first 90 days startup, and we know that we're pretty much almost there. If you haven't done any of these, it's okay, don't panic. And you'll see kind of a related pitfall in the yellow box. So once again, you want to notify offices and set up any infrastructure, what you might be using. We talked about the grants office, any negotiations. After your kickoff, if OSEP asks you to do something with, make some changes in your grant, your project officer would be the one who have told you to do that. So just making sure that you're finalizing that you're informing everyone, and that, once again, we talked about setting up accounts, and that you have some sort of shared document storage, and so that you can work across teams. And when I say teams, I mean your team, not necessarily using Teams. Also, you want to set up any required federal and institutional systems. Once again, G5, making sure you know how to navigate that, because that's where you'll do your APR reporting, and setting up your personnel data collection center, making sure that you have access, making sure that you can see your grants. Someone had already said they cannot see that. So just making sure you get those things established and set up. Once again, convening a kickoff. We know that the 90 days was a weird 90 days for OSEP's counting, but not, the grant timeline it's still moving. So you may not have had your kickoff meeting yet since the government hasn't been open that long, but, make sure that call is scheduled so you can answer any questions. Ask your project officer who might can attend the kickoff. Sometimes, if the budget person can be there, any key personnel, that would be great. And then also just reviewing all the goals, the timelines, and roles and responsibilities. Okay, building evaluation and data collection infrastructure. Of course, once again, if you have an external evaluator, that's not required, but if you have one or someone that you're consulting with, make sure that you are connecting with them around year one activities. You want to make sure that identify and what the GEPRA and project measures are, and that everyone's informed. Any tools that you're using, just identify and agree upon what tools and forms you're using, and make sure that you have a system for tracking not only progress for scholars, but also of the grant on the whole. So if you're doing both formative and summative evaluations. Okay, yeah, you want to launch scholar recruitment early again, as we talked about. You want to make sure that you're able to admit scholars when you said you were going to admit scholars. And again, and we'll talk about this more in the APR, if you weren't able to admit scholars, make sure that you're documenting that and why, because that's something you'll want to report in the APR, but we'll circle back to this. But we'll circle back when it's APR time and we have a webinar, but you definitely want to make sure that you're doing outreach, you're consulting with community partners, and you're working with your admissions department, anything that you have to do to make sure that you're meeting your recruitment benchmarks. Okay, again, if you're hiring, you want to connect with the person on campus. If you have a new position, or even if it's a graduate assistant, every campus is different, but I know for the Dream Center is under FIU. It takes very long sometimes to hire people. So you want to make sure that you are getting people hired on time, that everyone knows. If you have key personnel and community partners, you should be informing them. I would recommend that you send a letter or an email to the people who wrote a letter for you, just letting them know, hey, we got the grant, even though if it may not be a school district, that's a community partner. Just as a courtesy, you're notifying people if they have formal roles, you're letting them know, and just what the timeline is that you'll be moving forward, and what their role is, and at what time frame that they will be coming in to, fulfill the role that you have for them on the project. And once again, you want to make sure that you're implementing your work plan, that you're looking at your year one activities, that they're aligning with what you said you were going to do in the application. If you have a planning year, once again, you may want to do a backwards calendar, working backwards and making sure that you are going to meet that benchmark. So if that planning year or planning semester, that you have done everything that you said you're going to do, you've clarified roles, your community partners know, what's required of them, and also field placement coordination. If you have to set up any MOUs, agreements, you just want to make sure that that's all part of your work plan. And once again, communicate early with key personnel and partners. So informing them, district partners, again, in writing a courtesy letter, just letting those who wrote a support letter for you, letting them know that, or an email that you've been funded, and just reconfirming any partnerships that were established at the time that you wrote the application, and set up some sort of calendar of meetings. If it's monthly, check-in, informing community partners through newsletter, whatever makes sense for your grant. You just want to make sure that you have open communication, even those that you may not be entering into some sort of agreement with. You never know how they can support you in recruiting scholars, providing positions in the future, or they may become a practicum site or mentors. You just never know. So just have open communication with key personnel and those partners who are supporting your program. Very helpful to use some sort of shared calendar where you can set up benchmarks, where it notifies you of critical deadlines. Make sure you know when those reporting deadlines are for OSEP, for your internal university scholar data reporting deadline, which, once you get that all set up, they have their own deadline. And make sure that everybody who has a role is informed, so you're not missing deadlines due to lack of planning, sharing information, and just being on the same page. Yeah, and you want to set up scholars for success early. So making sure that if you have handbooks, that those are updated, that everybody has the information. Make sure that scholars are very clear on what the service obligation agreement says, what the payback cycle is for every 1 year of funding, 2 years of service. So you want to make sure that they're well informed, that you get those agreements signed, that if you're giving stipends or whatever the requirements are for your program at your institution, definitely work with your institution on scholar support in the service obligation document. And some of this it's also in the NIA. It talks about what scholar support is, what you can support scholars on. So stipends, tuition, books, travel. So it goes into a little bit more depth. So you want to be aware of that and make sure, and that's why that meeting with the budget office is important, so that they are also aware of what goes under that trainee stipend line under budget and what you can use it for scholars. And then, of course, being prepared, to enter the scholar data for service obligation tracking. So year one priorities, here they are. In a nutshell, we want to make sure that you're, doing early hiring, any onboarding, informing team members, and making sure everyone's on the same page. That you're establishing systems internally that's going to help you stay on track in managing the grant. That you're aligning your program with what the OSEP and APR requirements are, and the aligning to with your national professional organization standards for the area that you're training in, and that you're just meeting all those requirements. And then lastly, just getting ready to train scholars and making sure that the information that you need for reporting, that you have a way of reporting it, and that you're tracking the data, and that you also are providing, the wraparound service to retain scholars so they can be completers and they can fulfill service obligation. They don't have to pay back, and that you can count them as completers. So any questions?
So
for me?
I will go back to Lisa's question from earlier. I think it was probably answered, but just in case. She asked, does the college typically design their own agreement form for scholars, or is the template provided? So in the PDPDCS system, even before you log in, there's a link to download the service obligation form, and that form is a standard form that is provided by OSEP.
Yes, and I think I said it was under FAQs, but it's in that gray box to the left. When you log, the first landing page, there's 3 choices. You're going to have to select that you're under OSEP, that your project's under OSEP. And then the next landing page is where you'll see that gray box to the left, where you can find training, resources, FAQs, and the scholar agreements and exit certificates. So someone asked, how do you access the training for how to use the website? That's on their webpage. So when you go to their webpage and that's their training, but it's on their website under training and resources. And you have to, so it says, will they contact us? No, you have to initiate the contact. And once you initiate and log in, it'll ask if you have a grant. I'm not sure. Liz, you can probably on this side talk about how it looks from the grantees in.
So
But if
what should happen, and I was direct messaging privately with somebody else who's having an issue. So OSEP should have provided the PDP contractor with the information for the new grants. So if you've never used that site before, then the first time you go in, you need to set it up. You need to set up a two-factor. There's an app you need to download, like a Google Authenticator app for a two-factor authentication. But once you get in, your grant should already be there. Like it should be set up already because OSEP provides that information. It's possible that OSEP is a little behind on this because honestly, after you all found out you were funded, like the next day OSEP shut down and they're just getting back to work. So it could be that there's some delays in that. But if you try to get in and there's nothing there loaded for you, I would recommend you reach out to your project officer and let them know your grant hasn't been loaded to that space yet. There are trainings available within that. There's pre-recorded trainings. I know like each year they do a training. I think you can access those trainings from the main site, probably before you even log in, like where those scholar data forms are. So I would make sure you get on that. But you need to be loaded there by OSEP. So again, it could be that they're a little bit behind because of the delays and the shutdown and the reopening. But if you have scholars who you're already starting and you need to enter that data and put those forms together, make sure you let your project officer know. Now, when I know they will do trainings around this is in April. So there's two parts, well, there's more than two, but the initial two parts you'll be dealing with in the PDPDCS is first doing the scholar service obligation forms as students enter your program. But then every year in April, you're required to do an update to your student data. And so I know OSEP always puts on a webinar like in March or so about how to do that updating in the PDB DCS system, but they don't necessarily do that for the initial service obligation time, which might be now. So there will be a training, but again, that probably won't happen until closer to April, but there's definitely pre-recorded trainings from prior years. But OSEP has to load that information for you. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I can address Emily's question about if you're like your trainees in early childhood, but the scholar decides to take a job in K through 12. That is totally fine. What gets tricky at times, and probably is the main reason for service obligation, is because related services train across the lifespan. And so if you're training in a related service area, someone graduates and decides, hey, I'm going to work with adults, I'm going to go in adult rehab, that would not count as service obligation. So you have to make sure that you're training someone who is under the age which is outlined in IDEA. But if you train in early childhood and they decide to do high school, as long as they're servicing children with the IEP and it meets the IDA requirement and what we had on the slide under service obligation, it's fine.
And another question that my scholars often ask is, I'm getting specialized training in autism, but what if I end up teaching kids with intellectual disabilities? That's fine. Like Dawn said, anything under IDEA. And also it doesn't have to be in your local region. It can be anywhere in the United States or its properties. So there is that flexibility there as well.
Yeah, and sometimes too in related service and other areas, children may be for whatever reason in the home or in early childhood, they're in the community setting, or some may be in medically based classrooms. And so that's allowable. But if there's situations that aren't as clear cut, then the PDP Data Collection Center is your place, to answer those questions. And a lot of clarifying information is in the FAQs too, which will help.
So just to reiterate, just in case other people are having issues, if you are an M grantee, you should already have an account set up. If you're a K grantee, we literally just got that list of names just now, like yesterday. So we're still setting those up. So if you're a K grantee, yours will be forthcoming. If you're an M grantee, then you should already have access. So yeah, if you didn't already receive an email from Maria with your login information, you can't log in just quite yet, but I am suspecting Maria is busily behind the scenes working on adding you all now. So I would guess within by the end of the week, you'll have that set up.